But first, we begin tonight with an exclusive interview. There are people who believe they have information about Kavanaugh's behavior who have not been successful in sharing what they know or say they know with the FBI. That includes some of his former classmates at Yale, including his freshman year roommate, Jamie Roach. Jamie Roach is mentioned in the New Yorker article detailing Debbie Ramirez's allegation that Kavanaugh exposed himself to her at a party. He also came up during the Kavanaugh hearing last week. Till now, he hasn't spoken publicly. He's avoided it. He's written a piece for Slate titled, "I was Brett Kavanaugh's college roommate. He lied under oath about his drinking and terms in his yearbook." I spoke with Mr. Roach just before airtime. Mr. Roach, you say that Judge Kavanaugh lied under oath when he testified before the Judiciary Committee last week. Can you explain how you know that he lied?
I can. I wasn't able to watch the testimony. I was in an airplane, but I read the testimony the next day, and I was struck as I was reading it that, I know Debbie and
Debbie Ramirez.
From Debbie Ramirez, and I know from my experience with her that at least from my perspective, there is zero chance that she is making up this story. And I heard Dr. Blasey Ford's, or I read Dr. Blasey Ford's testimony, and I heard some of it later. And I believe that she's telling the truth. But then, when Brett started saying things about his drinking and his use of certain words, sexually oriented words, I knew he was lying because he was my roommate. We were in a room together. Our beds were 10 feet apart for a couple of months. And what struck me and made me more interested in speaking out about it is not only did I know that he wasn't telling the truth, I knew that he knew that he wasn't telling the truth.
You say that he was and I'm quoting you, a notably heavy drinker even by the standards of the time. That's obviously not sort of how he described himself. Just since this is knowledge you say you specifically have, can you describe what you mean when you say he was a notably heavy drinker?
Well, sure. This is a time not long after Animal House was shown, and people drank a lot. You went to parties and drank beer. Many people did. But there were, even within that environment, there were people who were loud drunks, who were sloppy drunks, who were belligerent drunks. But even by those standards, my memory of Brett was that he was on the far edge of this. He was notably heavier in his drinking than other people.
Can you? I don't know if there's any specific examples, or can you say how often? Was this just something on weekends? I've read some accounts that there was a keg in the main room of the room that the suite of rooms that you had between the three roommates.
It was an awful long time ago, and I can't say he was drunk on this date or not, but I can tell you that my recollection of my experience with him was that he was drunk frequently, that it wasn't drunk to the point of having trouble getting up every month or two. It was frequently. I would say with some confidence it was at least once, maybe twice on the weekends. It may have even been during the week.
You say that actually one of the things that he testified about was how focused on not only academics but also sports he was, in particular basketball, doing very hard workouts, and the implication being that is not an activity that somebody who drank to the degree which you say he drank would be able to do.
Oh, that's just nonsense. I was a varsity athlete and hung out with a lot of athletes, top athletes who can play at the collegiate level, can drink and work out. I don't think that there's anything that precludes one from the other.
You say also that he, and I'm quoting you, became aggressive and belligerent when he was very drunk. Do you have any specific examples? I'm not asking for dates, but just anything you remember, or how do you mean belligerent and aggressive?
I've been thinking a lot about that, and I want to provide a specific example, and I really can, and I should be honest about that. When I say belligerent, I mean belligerent in demeanor, yelling loudly. When people tell him to be quiet, tell him to shut up. I didn't see him personally ever hit anybody or ever behave aggressively towards women. When I say aggressive, I'm speaking more in carriage than in expression. When I first heard about this, I did call friends that I knew that knew both of us and spent time with Brett both freshman year and then after. And I did hear stories about times when he was physically violent, destructive. Those are not on the record, and they're not my stories to tell, but they made me feel like my memories of Brett were accurate.
Those were stories you heard from other students who were at Yale?
That's correct.
By the way, has the FBI talked to you either in any background investigation of Judge Kavanaugh ever? Because a big deal has been made of the fact that he went through more than 5 or I think 6 background investigations for various appointments over the years. Have you, as a freshman year roommate of him, have you ever been contacted by the FBI? And obviously in this latest investigation as well, have you been contacted?
You know, I've been scratching my head about that. I was listening to the radio, gosh, I want to say a week ago, and they were talking about Brett having been interviewed by the FBI, backgrounds done on 5 or 6 occasions prior to this, and it struck me that you know, I was his freshman year roommate, and if you wanted to know how somebody behaved in college, which is a time where, especially that transition from high school to college, where people are likely to have done something that expressed something that might have been a problem, that they would have contacted me, right? 5 or 6 FBI interviews. Now, I started talking to friends. I said, well, is this just sloppy work, or why would somebody not contact a freshman college roommate, his only freshman college roommate, to try and figure out what this guy was like? And this person was quick to say, you know, listen, the FBI are good. They're good guys. They take it very seriously. They do the work that they're told to do. You know, if they didn't contact you, it's because whoever was doing the background check wasn't interested in what was going on at that time.
So just for the record, you've never been contacted either now or in any past investigation?
I've never been contacted about Brett by the FBI ever.
So you actually, for people who don't know the situation, it was you, Brett Kavanaugh, and another roommate in this, basically there were 2 bedrooms. You and Brett Kavanaugh shared a bedroom, and there was a common room as well. Your bed was, just as you said, feet away from his. Did you ever see him black out? He has testified that he was asked about blacking out. He said he didn't. He said maybe sometimes he went to sleep. Did you ever see him black out?
You know, I didn't socialize with Brett, but being in the same room where he slept, I saw him when he arrived at home regularly, and I saw him in the morning. And I can tell you that he would come home and he was incoherent, stumbling. He would sometimes be singing. He occasionally would wear this, I think it was an old leather football helmet, and he would throw up. And then in the morning, would have a lot of trouble getting out of bed. You know, I wasn't an angel back then either. There were times when I did the exact same thing. So we commiserated on this issue, and so the answer to your question is, yeah, I saw him both what I would consider blackout drunk, and also dealing with the repercussions of that in the morning.
And you saw him throwing up?
Yeah.
On more than one occasion?
On more than one occasion.
Do you have any evidence that he ever had times where he did not remember what had happened the previous night?
You know, my sense of it is that we did talk about that, but I can't repeat any specific issue. It's too long ago. The
judge has testified about how much he liked and likes beer. Was it just beer that he was drinking, to your knowledge?
You know, my memory of it is that he was a beer guy.
When asked about your motivation to talk, when you talked to the New Yorker, which according you say you did reluctantly, and even now talking, you've been reluctant to give any interviews. Judge Kavanaugh has said that you and your third roommate hated each other. You got into fights, fist fights during the year, and that you had what he called a very contentious relationship. You didn't like each other. Is that true?
Not from my point of view. He referenced an incident where I played a prank on this third guy, where we took the furniture out of his room and set it up in the grass quad outside of our dormitory. And I set it up just like it was in his room and waited for him to return as if I was studying in his room outside. You know, it was a prank. I knew it would be irritating to him, but I thought he would think it was funny. And he didn't. He was very angry when he got back. He went to our common room where there was a keg of beer, and and filled up a pitcher and poured it on my bed, and I responded and did the same thing back to him. So we weren't close. That was a strained incident, but it never really turned into a fight. And I would say if I had to characterize this third person, we just didn't have any relationship. I didn't hang out with him, but I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about him, and I suspect it was the same for him.
Just so I'm clear, the pouring the beer on the bed, that was the third roommate, Dave. I believe his name was Dave, or was that Kavanaugh pouring the beer?
Yeah, I don't want to get into naming other people that aren't already dragged into this thing. I assume he has a good reason not to be part of it. But it was a third person who was in our suite. There were more than just the three of us in the suite.
Okay.
Brett and I were in a single room together, and there were a series of other people in adjoining rooms. But yeah, it was the third person who poured the beer. And
okay.
I got to tell you, I was trying to figure out why this was redacted. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. But I wonder if maybe the reason was that it forces you to say there was a keg of beer in your room, which in retrospect is not very usual.
Well, I want to ask about that because, during his hearing, what you're referencing is Judge Kavanaugh referred senators to a redacted interview that he previously did with the majority counsel staff. He was asked regarding your statement in support of Ms. Ramirez, quote, "Do you have any understanding of why your college roommate would make such an accusation?" Judge Kavanaugh replied, and I'm quoting, "Well, I'm not going to speculate. I've described the contentious relationship in that room generally and his issues generally." And then there's a bit of redaction, and Judge Kavanaugh is asked, quote, and says, quote, this is a question to him, "And his issues you testified being," the rest is redacted, and the next thing you see is Kavanaugh's answer, quote, "That's my understanding." Do you have any idea what he was actually talking about? Because that sounds like it's more than just a contentious relationship. It was some sort of issue.
I don't think so. My issues with Brett and with his friends were, sort of social behavior issues. I was also an athlete, but the guys I hung out with were more individual types. We were swimmers and water polo players and all that. We weren't group socializing athletes. And I just thought that the way that the guys acted when they were together, particularly the way they acted towards women, was not. I didn't think it was cool. So.
Do you know why that? Do you know why that would have been redacted? Because he did talk about a contentious relationship, so it seems like he was suggesting something else. It usually takes something of a pretty sensitive nature for them to redact something.
I've thought a lot about it. I can't think of anything. Again, it was a very long time ago, and it's possible that I'm forgetting something, but nothing comes to mind.
Okay. So whatever issues he's talking about, you're not sure. You also said that when Judge Kavanaugh was asked under oath about certain terms in his yearbook, boofing and Devil's Triangle, he said those were about flatulence and Devil's Triangle is a drinking game. You say, that's been disputed by other people. You say that is not true. Can you just explain how you know that? And you say you actually heard Brett Kavanaugh and his friends, or at least someone else in the room, using those terms in a way that it didn't mean what he said under oath.
Yeah, I guess I was not alone. I've heard and read a lot of people saying the same kind of thing, so I don't have any special inside knowledge here, but I was shocked when I heard that because, those words were commonly used, and they were references to sexual activities. If you think about the context in which you might hear those words, the way that he described they're defined and the way that they are defined, they're not interchangeable. So I heard them talking about it regularly. I think that contributed to some of my feelings about the fact that these guys treated women in a way I didn't like. But I'm not a specialist in language. I wasn't the only person who heard it. I can just say that I was surprised when I heard him say they meant those things.
Some people hearing this,
not what they meant.
Some people hearing this might be surprised that 30 some years later you remember particular phrases he used, Devil's Triangle or boofing, and not a particular incident about him being being belligerent and the like. You're saying you absolutely remember him using those phrases, meaning sexual terms.
Yeah, it's very difficult in these sorts of situations, but the truth for me, and I think for others, is that there are things in your past that you remember photographically, and there are things that are just adjacent to it that you can't remember at all. I mean, we talked about the prank incident earlier. I have a very clear picture in my mind of the person with a keg of beer in their hand slowly pouring it onto my pillow and to my mattress, but I can't tell you who the other person was that was with me setting up and then returning the furniture to the room.
But if,
so it's,
sorry, but if Judge Kavanaugh in his testimony is implying that you have animus towards him because he was closer to another one of your roommates who you had fights with, a contentious relationship with, and that has caused you animus and animus toward Judge Kavanaugh, you say what?
I think that's absurd. I didn't really care much about the third person. I had an incident with him which made it so that I wasn't interested in socializing with him, but you know, I had my own social circle and things to do. I wasn't spending a lot of time and energy worrying about him even while I was there. You know, we're 30-something years after that now. You know, the idea that I would take this sort of social and reputational damage that I'm already taking for this in order to settle a score with the guy 35 years ago who I don't even care about, it just doesn't make sense.
I'm going to have more of my exclusive interview with Brett Kavanaugh's freshman roommate at Yale just ahead, speaking out for the first time on television. And well, again, the breaking news tonight that senators will be able to read the FBI's report on sexual assault and misconduct allegations against Brett Kavanaugh tomorrow morning starting at 8 a.m. The FBI did interview more people today, we're told, according to a person familiar with the interviews. That does not include Kavanaugh's freshman roommate at Yale. I spoke with Jamie Roach tonight, and he says he's never been contacted by the FBI for any of its background investigations into Brett Kavanaugh. This is part two of our exclusive interview. He spoke about his support for Debbie Ramirez, the former Yale student who told The New Yorker that Kavanaugh exposed himself to her at a party. I want to ask you about Debbie Ramirez's allegations, and just to be clear, you've said you have no direct knowledge of them, whether or not they did in fact happen or not. Is that correct?
When Ronan Farrow of The New Yorker called me and he said, somebody reported this incident, they said that you might have been there, and we're calling and talking to Debbie, she's not sure she wants to talk about it, do you remember anything? What I told him is, I have spotty memories of something happening. I remember Debbie being upset, I remember talking to her about it, but I do not remember accurately enough to say that this particular thing happened or that Brett was involved.
When you say you have spotty memories of something happening, do you mean spotty memories of hearing about something happening or spotty memories of you witnessing something happening?
No, I was definitely not in the room. It wasn't my crowd. No, it would have been Debbie talking to me about it.
So you have spotty memories of Debbie Ramirez at the time talking about it?
Yeah, I want to be crystal clear about this, though. If I felt confident in my memory of her telling me that this happened, then I would be talking only about that. This is too long ago and too vague a memory to be part of the conversation.
Can I ask why you are doing an interview now? Because it's something you have not done. I mean, your name was in the New Yorker. And you had made a statement. You've written an op-ed. Why come forward more now?
You know, I get asked that question by a lot of people. I have decided and then decided not to participate in this thing multiple times. There's very little upside for me and there's considerable downside for me. But, you know, at the end of the day, it feels like there are not enough people who are willing and can credibly say, you know, I know this girl. And she didn't lie and she wouldn't lie, and I can't see any reason why she would. And so it felt to me like somebody had to get up and speak for her. Now other people have, and I think that's terrific. But as Brett's roommate, I'm in a singular position, at least of the people who are willing to talk, to say, hey, listen, I saw him do this stuff that he said under oath that he didn't do. I saw him use words in a different way than the way he said under oath they were used. You know, if a person isn't truthful about these little things, then you know, we ought to think very seriously about whether we should tell Debbie that she's wrong or crazy and believe him.
And for someone listening to this who says, well, look, you know, you're talking about a freshman drinking and whether or not they passed out or whether or not they blacked out, how much they drank. Lots of people do that on college campuses back then, certainly, and even now. What you are saying is for you, it's not those activities per se, because you yourself said you drank. It's not being honest about it now.
Yeah. I mean, that's the hardest thing for me. You know, I knew people at Yale who never drank, right? I knew people at Yale who never did anything that they would be worried might come up. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of them, and I'm in a position to be a witness to some of the things that he's talking about. No, I don't think, listen, I think it's terrible to drink too much. I think it's dangerous, and I think it encourages bad activity. But I know that when I was in school, many people did it. And I don't think that's disqualifying. I don't think that means that you can't have a strong career and even be a moral person. I don't think that's condemning. I think it is not taking responsibility for your actions that is condemning. You know, I've had lots of conversations with people over the last week or two, women who said these things happened to me and I didn't speak up because people would attack me and I'd be double punished, and guys who said, hey, listen, I drank too. I don't think I did anything, but I'm scared to death somebody's going to come up and say that I did. And you know, that's just the fact of now. But I think a guy of high character would get up and say, you know, listen, I drank. A lot of people drank. Sometimes I drank too much. I don't think I did anything wrong. I don't think it's in character to do the things that these women are claiming I did. But you know what? If I did, I feel awful about it. You know, I'm sorry, and I wish there was something I could do. But, you know, he doesn't say that.
Jimmy Roach, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, with me now is David.